Good afternoon. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar with Rio SEO, Local SEO for Enterprise Brands Today, What's New and Where to Focus Next. My name is Erica. I'm the Director of Marketing for the LSA, and I will be your moderator for today's event. A few housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar is being recorded and will be circulated to all attendees with the presentation within 24 hours of broadcast. Questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end. You can, however, ask questions at any time during the webinar by using the question window in your control panel. Our speakers today are Chad Klingensmith, who is a senior SEO strategist at Rio SEO. He brings over 12 years of digital marketing experience and has worked with hundreds of brands across local, e-commerce, healthcare, retail, and other industries to help improve their brand's visibility in competitive markets. Joy Hawkins is the owner of the Local Search Forum and Sterling Sky. She is also the author of the Expert Guide to Local SEO, an advanced training manual for people wanting a detailed look at what it takes to succeed in the local SEO space. In addition to her consulting and training, she is a recognized leader and speaker on the local SEO circuit. You can also find her on Twitter, volunteering as a product expert on the Google My Business forum. Crystal Tang leads local product strategy for Rio SEO. She helps global enterprise brands across hundreds of thousands of locations in finance and insurance, retail, hospitality, healthcare, and more. She has extensive experience in forming and crafting local strategy and aids multi-location brands in solving their most persistent local marketing challenges to improve organic visibility, search rankings, and online to offline traffic. Without further ado, I will hand the screen over to Crystal to get you all started. Thanks.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks for the introduction and for hosting today's webinar with Rio and Sterling Sky. Before we get started, I do want to let everyone know that we will be live tweeting throughout the webinar. Feel free to follow along or tweet at us at Rio_SEO. As Erica mentioned, we'll have time at the end of the webinar for Q&A, so please submit any questions you have in the window panel. In today's webinar, myself, Chad, and Joy are going to dive into changes in local and organic ranking and how this is impacting brands large and small, the number of updates and changes being made in Google My Business and where you should focus. We'll touch on how spam, specifically listing spam, not the canned meat, reviews and categories can impact your ranking. Joy has some really great use cases that she's going to share. We'll discuss which specific off-page content and technical optimizations will help brands move the needle in competitive local markets. And of course, with all these changes and factors and how they influence your position locally and organically, we'll share where our clients are finding the most success. It's actually quite coincidental that we're here today because it's been almost 2 years to the date since our last LSA webinar that included Rio and Sterling Sky. We recently revisited the previous webinar content and found it really interesting how much has shifted in just 2 short years. Some of those shifts are what's inspired today's topics. Our previous webinar, which was titled How to Use Organic SEO to Rank in Google's Local 3-Pack, was based on the evidence that we had back in 2017 that showed how critical it was to have a solid organic strategy to even compete and succeed locally. From that webinar, our main takeaways that we shared include having high organic rankings increases the probability of getting into the Google Local Pack, how organic positioning impacts local rankings. We determined that a well-optimized locator on your website will improve visibility locally, and that local and organic SEO were not separate things. Today, we'll share just how true or untrue these stand to be 2 years later. In nearly every industry and country, Google is going to drive a large majority of your search traffic. And as I mentioned, one of the challenges brands and marketers face today are the number of changes that can impact your business and how it's presented to consumers. Google made 3,200 changes last year, averaging 8 changes a day. It's impossible to keep up with, so we really want to help you focus on the most impactful changes, specifically the ones that move the needle. One thing that I do want to point out is that if you're interested in keeping up with all of these changes, Joy has an incredible resource on her website on Sterling Sky that's really tailored to all the changes in local. I personally keep my own list, but find myself constantly referencing her site for things I've missed, maybe things that I need additional context on, and it's really a great resource. So really just to keep updated on all the changes, especially as it relates to local and specifically Google, given how many changes they're happening and how important they are in the marketplace. So we can all agree that Google is a behemoth in search, but why are we segmenting and analyzing the local algorithm? Well, that's because more and more often we see users end their search journey at your local listing. In many cases, Google is the consumer journey. In our analysis of a couple 100,000 locations on GMB, only 1 in 69 views on Google resulted in a click to the website. Because of this, it's becoming increasingly important to focus on your local strategies and prioritize this over other initiatives. Your goals, your KPIs for local should really be the actions users are taking on your listings. Everything you do should really optimize and encourage engagement. You got to give users what they're expecting to see on your listing or entice them to click for more. Of course, it's nice to rank really well for your targeted terms, and it's a good user experience that all your data is going to be accurate when a user finds you. But if they're not doing anything when they see your listing, if they're not clicking for driving directions, reading reviews to find more about your service, they're not asking a question or trying to make a reservation, then you really aren't truly succeeding at local. These are really how you should be measuring and communicating your success. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Chad, who's going to share some insight about the changes we're seeing in relation to the local and organic algorithms.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you for everybody joining on today. There's been a lot of questions been floating around about wondering if organic impacts local. And back in 2017, Rio did a study to see if there was any changes to see if organic did impact local. And from this, we saw a very clear correlation that having higher organic rankings would impact your local. And if your organic didn't perform well, neither did your local. It was very clear. And this is from January 2017 to June 2017. And we just decided we wanted to expand our search further. We wanted to see if this correlation still held true. Are the algorithms for our organic and local still correlating, or are they splitting off, especially with all the changes? So we did an expanded search from June 2017 all the way up to June 2019. And we looked at more locations across our clients and pick up the data to see if this still held true. And if you look closely in the beginning of 2017, you'll see that, there was some correlation, but as time went on, there was more and more deviance. Organic was going one direction, local was going another. And this wasn't a complete surprise considering that all the changes have been going on with Google My Business. There's a lot more engagement, a lot more services and tools and features that you can use in local. So the question is, hey, is it worth it to really put the effort into organic ranking signals to do better on local? Well, we got back to what Moz was saying, the Moz 2018 report that came out in November. And this was a very widely accepted study that was used in our industry. And there are 5 signals that you need to improve upon on organic that will also impact local. They both spill over each other. Link signals, on-page signals, behavioral signals, personalization, social signals. You can only improve those if you have a local landing page. And those are still heavily weighted into the local pack for the local rankings. So without a website, you can't accomplish this. It's going to push you further in the local pack. So you can't ignore each other. Next slide, please. And we also looked at how this has changed from 2017 to 2018. Obviously, Google My Business Signals is a much more powerful local ranking signal. But link signals is still very strong for the local pack, for local rankings. On-page signals, those are the updates you take for, say, your SEO optimization, your content, etc. You need a landing page for that. Review signals obviously is very strong for local. We all know that. Behavioral signals, personalization, especially behavioral signals, engagement, what you do on the website for organic is still, you need to have a local landing page to accomplish this. Next slide, please. So what's the future of organic SEO to impact local? Well, there's a few things you need to pay attention to. You need to have a well-optimized local landing page if you want to perform well for both organic and local. And this is also true for service area businesses. If you're trying to push a service area business, you can only claim one listing. And when you claim that listing, you have an option to tell Google My Business, hey, this is the area that we're promoting. But if you're trying to reach out to other areas for whatever you're pushing, say you're a plumber, you're living in this, your office is in, say, this city, and you want to target other cities, you need to have organic landing pages that talk to this. And if you don't have that, all you have is one listing for Google My Business. So what are on-page SEO signals? What do you need to do? You need to work on your SEO element optimization. That's going to impact your local. And one thing Rio has really been pushing a lot is using custom long-form hyperlocal content. This is how, when you have several locations and you want to speak to your users and customers in that particular location. This improves rankings and also improves voice search optimization. People might be asking questions, and for say long tail keywords, say, where can I find a plumber that's open after 8 o'clock where I'm at? Well, it's kind of hard to speak about that in a Google My Business listing, but you can with custom content and custom copy you have on your local landing page. Organic SEO is still worth it. It's worth the fight. Next slide, please. So there was a challenge that Rio was presented with a while ago. We had a nationwide pharmaceutical retailer that was really having a tough time in the New York City market. They had some very stiff competition. They want to perform better, and they came to us and asked us, what can we do to give us an extra push? This client had already many location pages that were well optimized, but they wanted to take things a step further. So to respond to that challenge, we decided to develop custom content. This is text talking about cross streets, talking about services that these locations offer. And we tested this for this market. And there we decided to compare how well this client was performing in the second quarter of 2017 compared to the second quarter of 2018. We applied this content in the first quarter of 2018. When we did this, we saw an 80% jump in clicks and over 200% increase in impressions. And again, this is work that's being done on the organic side, on the local landing page. And that also helped them perform better locally as well. So I'm here to field any more questions. It's, again, organic is going to be very important. But I'm going to go ahead and send this over to Joy. Thanks a lot.
All right, sorry about that, guys. I think I was muted there for a second. So I'm going to be diving into some insights from my MozCon presentation that I actually just did a little over a week ago. So the entire kind of premise of the presentation was that these two algorithms, local and organic, are actually separate things. I'm going to dive into some of the things specific to the local pack rankings, to kind of explain why there is so much difference between the two. So to kind of dive in, I started by referencing a study that was done recently by Moz that was looking to find out like how much these two overlap. So this study that I've linked to here, it's free, you can download it and read it. It's really fascinating and talks a lot about this topic. In it, they found basically that only 8% of listings in the local pack results matched websites that were below in the search results itself, so the organic results. And even digging further, out of the 8% that did match up, only 12% of those were actually in the top 20. So very different than studies we've kind of seen in the past that used to show that there was a lot of overlap. And, basically if you were in the organic results, you were definitely in the local results, and kind of vice versa. So the main thing that we've been seeing that impacts why the local results are so different is proximity. So I'm going to kind of dive in and explain a bit what this is and how this works. So when you do a search on Google, you scroll down to the very bottom of your page, and it'll usually list a zip code and a city that Google thinks you're located in. So this location, how Google has you pinpointed, impacts what you see very drastically. And I'll be sharing quite a few examples here. According to the Moz Local Search Ranking Factors study that Chad mentioned earlier, the proximity, or like the user's location, to make it more like plain English, is the #1 ranking factor that dictates local pack rankings. So the most important thing you can possibly have as an influence is your location. To kind of illustrate this a bit better, there was a study that was done by Juris Digital recently where they took one single keyword for a law firm, and I think it was something like personal injury lawyer, and they searched that from 138 different zip codes. And they see in the graph here, there was 82 different law firms that were represented. So depending on your location when you were searching, even though you're searching the exact same keyword, the local results were vastly different. I have a link to the study down below there if you want to read the whole thing. To help illustrate this even further, there is a tool that we use quite a bit at my agency called the Local Falcon. And if you're unfamiliar with it, I'll kind of explain how it works. You put in the business in the business name section there. So it pulls from the Google My Business listing, and then you put in a keyword. So I put in dentist near me to help illustrate this. And then you can kind of change how far of a radius you want it to search from. So if you really want to know how you rank for this one keyword across, 5 miles from the point where the actual business is located, you put it in there. Now, what this is really helpful at illustrating is why sometimes even if you're scanning from a zip code and your rank tracker set up and you know how you rank in a particular zip code, that position that it's returning is sometimes inaccurate, and this kind of explains why. Everything inside that blue box there is in the same zip code. So if you're a dentist and you want to know what your ranking is in 77006, you don't actually have one ranking, technically speaking. As you can kind of see here, sometimes you're second, sometimes you're third, sometimes you're eighth. It depends on the user's actual coordinates, like geo coordinates, not the zip code they're in, because we know like zip codes can be very big and very vast. So what a user sees when they're on one end of the zip code is often different than what they'll see on the other end of the zip code. And to show you exactly like what this looks like, this is half a mile away in the same zip code. You'll see that the results on the left don't match the results on the right at all. Like not even the same dentist listed, on either one. So dentist is kind of an extreme example because there are so many dentists and they're in very close proximity. So this is very similar to what we see with restaurants, for example. In other industries, it's not quite this bad. It just depends on how much competition there is. So flipping kind of to the organic side, how much proximity to the searcher matters on the organic side. It does matter. Your location does get factored into what Google shows you, but not as much. It's the 27th ranking factor according to the same survey. So like compare that with, being number one, quite different. And to kind of illustrate this a bit better, we kind of repeated the study that Juris Digital did, but we wanted to look at organic versus local. And on the organic side, we found that there was not as much variance. Unlike there was a study that showed, 82 different law firms, and it was a huge difference. We found that the one law firm that was first was there 100% of the time in every single postal code that we checked it from. So very different results, and we see a lot more stability when it comes to organic. So here's like another picture. This is using a tool called Places Scout, which is really fantastic. It has these really cool map overlays. So this is a client of ours, and when I scan the keyword lawn care, he ranks really well organically. You can kind of see around the Toronto area. So if you kind of get north of Toronto, which he services, he's still there. On the local side, you'll see he kind of vanishes when you get outside of his immediate area, which is very typical. This is what we see, generally speaking, for most industries. So it's not surprising in this case that 90% of his traffic from that particular keyword is from organic. Obviously, his exposure there is much higher, but that's not always the case. When we look at other industries, we see lots of times where the amount of leads that they get from Google My Business is way higher than the organic side. So it's really important to remember that you kind of have to track both. And how you do this if you're uncertain of like how to break down the traffic and know if your traffic's coming from the local results versus the organic results. I have a guide listed here that I wrote earlier this year that explains exactly how to do this. And you'll be able to break down the data inside Search Console, provided you're using what are called UTM codes inside your Google My Business listing. Might sound kind of techy, but honestly, anyone can do it. It's pretty simple. The other thing that I wanted to point out was with local rankings on how unstable they are. So this is something that I am quite fascinated with, but there was this tweet done by Chris Green who did this study, and he looked at how much rankings on the organic side changed based on the hour. So he decided to scan every hour just to see if there was any variance. And he found basically that anything below page 1 was really choppy, but anything on page 1 was sort of stagnant. You can kind of see the top lines there, they don't shift much. So that's kind of interesting and fascinating on the organic side. On the local side, we do see a lot of fluctuation, and fortunately it's a little worse than being just the first page. We see anything below position 5 tends to be really choppy, and I'll share some examples. So this is a scan for a criminal defense attorney. So you'll notice basically over the course of a couple weeks, the top 2 listings remain consistent. They're both there, but everything else is kind of all over the place. You've got listings going down, listings going up, listings disappearing. This is very common and can often be very confusing to look at. This is another example for a different attorney search. I believe this one was San Diego personal injury attorney. In this case, it was even worse. Only the first listing remained consistent over the course of a couple weeks. And you'll see these other ones going up and down. And this is with the exact same search settings, searching from the exact same location. There is a lot of variance. This is a more stable case. So lawn care, there isn't as much competition for. So that's why you don't see as much insanity when compared to lawyers. However, you'll still see this like pattern here of like, oh, this listing's now gone, it disappeared, and this one moved up 1 position, and that one moved up 1 position. It's a lot to look at. So we, as kind of a general practice, would advise not to send ranking reports to clients or agency. We kind of focus on call tracking instead, and kind of measuring results in the forms of leads instead of, you know, sending these screenshots or ranking reports constantly, because they are honestly very confusing and they do tend to vary quite a bit. The other thing that we see in the local space that is not really an organic problem, but makes the local results vary, is this thing that we call the local filter. So on the organic side, there's filtering going on. We know this. There is a organic filter that looks for duplicate content. So if you have 15 pages on your website that talk about the same topic, generally Google will pick 1, maybe 2, and then they'll filter the rest. And this is intentional. We kind of all know about this. I wrote an article actually about how this impacts big brands on a local level that you should definitely check out if you're not super familiar with how that works. But that's actually not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about what we call the Possum filter, which is something that only impacts the local results, and it's designed to basically filter out listings based on their location. So this is only if you have listings in the same industry. So think about a real estate office where you have 15 realtors working out of the same office. They're all using the same categories. They all want to rank for real estate terms. They don't. Google generally picks, you know, 1 or 2 of the top listings and filter the others. So we actually have had this happen, and I'll illustrate how this works. You go to Google, you type in, here's a search for an attorney, you type in personal injury attorney Palmdale, for example, you would see the one in green on the left is the only one there. But if you zoom in once, you'll actually get all these other listings that are at the same address that are also lawyers that don't show up anywhere initially unless you zoom in. So these are filtered listings, and this is how you can tell that your listing's been filtered. So when we had a client that was filtered, was a real estate agent, we found that 2 realtors were ranking, 3 were filtered, which is typical, and those are just the top 20 results. I didn't go back to page 2 or 3 to find out how many more there were. We see this a lot, so like just not even there. One of the main culprits of this, or reasons why we see good businesses get filtered that shouldn't be filtered, in my opinion, is this concept called keyword stuffing, which I'm going to explain a bit about. So you'll see in this example here, this was actually the culprit that was filtering out our client. And when we went to their listing, it was listed as their name, then the name of the city, then the words real estate professional. And although that might not look like a problem, it's actually against Google's guidelines to do this. Technically, their guidelines state it should just have, in this case, the realtor's name, and everything additional is a violation of guidelines, but it has a huge impact on ranking. So essentially, just to recap, by them kind of cheating and violating guidelines, it actually causes them to rank, and my client is getting filtered as a result. So imagine kind of how the business owners that aren't breaking guidelines would feel about this. Not generally great. So this kind of ties into another thing that I'm going to touch on a bit, which is what I call fake listings. Both of these things are violating the exact same terms that Google has, which are their terms for Google My Business. And I'll explain what you should do about both these cases, but I'll jump into the second case first before I kind of explain the to-dos and what you should do if you are in this scenario. So this is another client of ours actually in the insurance space, and they were doing really well for home insurance terms, ranking pretty good. They were in the top 3. And then all of a sudden earlier this spring, we saw this drop off. So you'll kind of see here they were ranking, then they drop off, and then you'll notice they went back to 3. So I'll explain what happened. I did some digging to try to figure out what was going on there. And I noticed that when most of the home insurance terms were searched on Google in their area, you would see results like this. So to be perfectly clear here, there is no insurance company, in case you're wondering, called Homeowners Insurance Provo. This is what we're talking about when Crystal mentioned spam and she says she's not talking about the meat. She's talking about these. So this is what we call spam, or I sometimes call it crap on the map. We have a hashtag called Stop Crap on the Map, which I like to use a lot on Twitter. But this is a big problem for a lot of industries and was exactly what was going on in my client's case, which was pushing him out of the local results. So there was an article that was written about this recently by the Wall Street Journal. And if you haven't heard of it or read it, I strongly suggest checking it out because it does a very good job of illustrating how much of a problem this is and why it is hurting small businesses a lot. So in this article, they had a bunch of different things, and I thought one was really fascinating. One of the guys that actually creates these fake listings went on the record and talked a bit about not how he does it, but just the ways that he makes money from it. So he mentions in the article that he charges $100 for each fake listing that he creates, and that he can create up to 3,800 fake listings per day. So stop for a second and do the math on that and just realize how much money that is. And you can see really quickly why this is such a growing trend and why there are a large group of marketing companies that will use this as a strategy to make themselves money or make their clients money, because it's a lot. But if you're sitting there wondering, okay, great. So let's say this guy, creates 3,800 fake listings a day. These listings don't have websites most of the time. They don't have established brands. Google doesn't recognize the brand name. They have no reviews on them. They have no citations. They have literally no authority. So they shouldn't rank, theoretically speaking, right? Because Google doesn't rank crap, ideally. And we know that, on the organic side, this is kind of an accurate picture. Ahrefs published a study to talk about, how long it takes websites to rank on the first page of Google. It takes a long time. Even within a year, only 5% of, newly published pages will get to the top 10, right? So Google's kind of got this figured out. These fake listings shouldn't rank anywhere, right? Well, unfortunately, on the local side, fake listings rank on Google, or any listing actually that you publish inside Google My Business will rank on Google within a day. And we have here's an example. This is for one of the most competitive industries out there in one of the most competitive cities. On the organic side, we're talking, these people have like hundreds of thousands of links. They're probably spending more than $10,000 a month on SEO for each location. Like, these are really competitive markets that you're not going to get in on the organic side for years. This was a listing we put up. This is the first month it was live. Again, no authority in this market area yet. It got 813 searches. Not a large number, but again, times that by 3,800 a day. This was the number of actions on his listing just within the first month. So you can see, again, you're generating, let's say 18 between visits to the website and calls. This could be a really lucrative business for those that are creating these fake listings. So Google kind of responded to this article and talked about how they removed 3 million listings in 2018. So they're aware of this problem. They're sort of working on it, blah, blah, blah. So that was their, response to the article. I thought it was really interesting that they mentioned that they actually have seen a 50% increase in this number since 2017. So needless to say, this is something we've seen an increase in as well, but it definitely impacts why there's such a variance between organic and local. What kind of astounded me was that in the same report, they talked about how 250,000 listings that they removed out of this number were ones that were reported by users. So you might be sitting here thinking, okay, that's a lot. Like users are going and reporting these fake listings to Google, and Google's taking them down, and they took down like quite a few. But I'll explain why that number is actually very low. We have a lot of clients that get impacted by spam. One of them is in the glass repair industry. We've been working with them for a year and a half. We've had Google remove 316 fake listings. Listings that should never have been live, got live, re-reported them. But this is one business in one market area in one industry. For another one that's in the junk car space, we've been doing this for about 3 months. We've had 92 listings reported and removed. So again, very small representation of what's out there. Here's another client. This is a client in the tree removal space. So using the same tool that I mentioned earlier, the local Falcon, this is the before picture of where he ranks for tree removal when we first started working with him. So right away, we realized, wow, there's a lot of fake listings he's competing against. We got Google to remove just 7, that's it, not a high number, 7 listings. And the after result was what happened as a result. So you'll see like how much coverage he now has in comparison to what he had before when those 7 fake listings were competing with him. So very impactful as a strategy. And again, like this is maybe not the case for every industry. I'll be honest, we don't see a lot of spam in retail or hotels, for example. But honestly, there are some industries that I didn't think were spammy, like dentists, where we're starting to see spam all over the place now. So it's kind of crazy, like how it evolved. I feel like people will basically create fake listings for any industry where they can sell leads. So I would definitely suggest that you look if you are not looking for these types of things already. And as kind of a to-do, where you report them is through this form that Google has. They came out with this earlier this year. It is a form that goes directly to Google. You will get the right people looking at it. Essentially, it gets reviewed by a human, usually within 2 weeks of someone sending it in. But I warned people last week at MozCon. I was like, now that I'm telling like 1,500 people about this form that maybe didn't know it existed before, who knows, that wait time might be longer than 2 weeks. But this is the form where you can send it in when you find a listing that is either adding keywords to their business name or creating fake listings when they shouldn't be. And unlike what we kind of see with spam reports on the organic side, Google does act on these. So that is somewhat nice. Here's more about where you can get in contact with me. I have a newsletter. Crystal mentioned that resource on our website that we have. It's free. It highlights all the recent changes that Google's been making, and then I try to include all of those in my weekly newsletter. I also do have a training guide that is like a paid thing for people wanting to learn about local SEO. So there's a promo code there. But yeah, that's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Joy. So now we're going to go ahead and move into the Q&A portion. I'm going to try and get the mouse back. There we go. So I know we have quite a few questions coming in. All right. And if you have questions and you didn't submit them, feel free to submit them in the box now. The first question we have is, please expand more on what types of things are hyperlocal content. So maybe Chad, if you want to take this and then.
Sure. So hyperlocal content is when we actually, this is the copy, this is the text used in the body form of your landing page. A well-optimized landing page will already have the NAP, the name, address, and phone number, and everything that is relevant for a local user trying to find out what they can get from a local business to develop so they can contact them or visit a restaurant, etc. But the custom content itself talks about the business more in details. It talks about cross streets. It talks about what it's next to. It gives more information locally about what this business is about. It also goes in further details about the services and products of this location. It's very common, we see this all the time, where we might have a client or a prospect or someone who's interested and they don't have any main body content at all, or maybe just some templated content. There's just a few words that's used over and over again against multiple locations. We always localize this content. We make sure that it's using phrases that are relevant to the city and zip code. But to take things a step further, to make this unique, that's something that Google appreciates. That's something the user can appreciate. They want to find out more about this business. This is something that can help both improve rankings, especially long tail keywords that talk about this business. So we're a true believer of that here at Rio. We have plenty of case studies that have shown evidence that this works. So I hope that answers your question, David. Thank you.
Yeah, and then also, I know obviously Joy's mentioned this, but a great resource just for everything to do locals, local you, and they do deep dives. And just this week, they did roll out a deep dive where they talk about content and gave some great tips. So if you have time, you need to download a podcast this week. That's definitely a recommendation. All right. I do see a couple people asked about, the download of the presentation. Yes, we'll share that over to everyone, all the attendees by tomorrow. Joy, a question for you. So what do you mean by zoomed in on the filter to see filtered out listings? How do you do the zoom?
Yeah, so literally I'll try to explain in some words. It's easier to do when I have a computer, but so you do a search on Google. Let's say you type in dentist Miami, and you get the traditional 3 results that show up. Usually right underneath it, there's something that says more, where you click to get the full list. So we call that full list that you get. Usually there's 20 per page, the local finder. That's the terminology that we use for it. So when you have the local finder open, basically just zoom in with your mouse, literally once, and you will find that the listings will change, and you'll see that kind of pattern that I was alluding to, especially for businesses in industries like real estate agents and lawyers and doctors. There are certain industries where this really applies to, because you usually will get a building that has, let's say, 10 law firms in it, right? Or you'll have the realtor example. I think insurance is another one, but definitely more in the professional industries the professional service industries that we see this in.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly. We see it a lot with professionals. Every industry that, professionals are represented, it's common. Mm-hmm. All right. And then this one again for Joy. Can you clarify the correct way to set up Google My Business for real estate agents? Is there an example with best practices? I think this is in reference to the naming guidelines and filtering.
Yeah, so honestly, if you're a realtor, use your home address. That's what I would do, because realtors work both out of their home and their office, right? My mother-in-law is a realtor, so she has an office locally that she goes to, like most do. But honestly, she works at a home way more. So it's totally fine for you to use your home address as a realtor. Just make sure you set yourself up as a service area business, because you're now adhering to those guidelines where you have to clear your address. So it actually doesn't display you probably don't want people showing up at your house anyway. But there's a clear option inside the Google My Business dashboard. And keep in mind, you're only allowed one listing. You're not allowed to set one up at your house and then set up another one at your office. But I would strongly suggest for realtors to use their home addresses, because you're not going to run into the filter issues you'll run into if you use a shared location.
All right. And then this one is kind of a broad question. What software is used to track ranking and trends? Joy, I know you shared Local Facts, Falcon, and Places Scout. Did you have any other recommendations?
Yes, Bright Local, which I feel like I should have probably stuck their logo on the one slide, but they're the other one that I had the screenshots from, where you saw drops in ranking and stuff in the graph. That is from Bright Local. So we use them for all of our clients as well.
Perfect. And then obviously here at Rio, we have our, enterprise rank tracking, trends reports, and then oftentimes if we need more detail, more granularity, Chad will set up some custom reports for our clients. All right, this is a fun one. Why would someone pay for a fake listing? So I'll just kind of intro that, and then obviously Joy, you can add it. One I think is a great example, the realtor one. Technically, if your mother-in-law were to set up another listing for her office when she already had a listing there, because maybe they're cities apart and she wants to rank in both ones in #1 position for whatever cases, and it isn't doing it the proper way, it's a quick, fast, easy way to get additional visibility and get more lead gen. But Joy, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, so Mike Blumenthal actually did a really enlightening post on this. I'll try to get the link so that I can send it out. Because half the time the business owners do not know they're buying leads from a fake listing. I've talked to many lawyers that we work with and insurance agents that we work with that buy leads, and like the lead providers don't really disclose where they get the leads from. And Mike, the reason why I want to find this article from Mike is he actually called some of these companies that you buy leads from, and he recorded the call and went through like all this stuff with the person where he was asking them like, where do you get your leads from? And the girl on the phone, like the sales girl, didn't even know that the listing that was on Google that was fake, was an insurance listing, was one that the company she worked for had created, but it was. And like, I think it's just one of those things where, you know, these lead generating companies, they sell leads, they want to get leads in whatever way they can. And the business owners that are buying the leads often don't realize they're cannibalizing their own traffic, unfortunately.
All right. So next question is, I would like to hear about short codes, which I'm not quite sure what those are. But is it advantageous to, I think he means UTM, like tracking parameters. Is it advantageous to add a short code? Should you add geo and keywords in here? And do you recommend adding short codes to all of your client locations? I take that as like a tracking parameter.
UTM tracking.
I think he's talking about. Yeah. I think he's talking about short names, Crystal. You know the new feature that just launched in Google My Business last month.
Okay.
It's called short names.
Okay. Yeah, that could be it.
There's no harm in adding them now. They fixed the bug. There was a bug when they launched earlier this month where adding a short name actually caused listings to just randomly disappear. So that was fun, but that's fixed now, so that shouldn't be an issue. But we've been doing, for most of our clients, we have been doing keywords, but honestly, I don't think it does anything. Like if you've got a short name that's like Dentist Seattle, I don't think it's going to make you rank higher for the keyword Dentist Seattle. So honestly, something short and memorable is what I would go with.
Yeah, I think what we've configured and have recommended to our clients as well is, you know, are you going to be sharing this in social media campaigns or email campaigns? Where is this going? And then really base it off of that. But yeah, the shorter the better. I think they're supposed to be short, so to share. All right, our friend Jason has asked a few questions, of course. He wants to know if you think Google will ever get a handle on spam. I can say that they definitely are hearing about it a lot more, and at least, you know, making the problem more visible is going to urge them to work a little bit more. But maybe Joy, I know you escalate and bring up a lot more than I do in regards to spam.
No, I don't think they're ever going to get a handle on spam, and Jason probably would agree with me on that. But I mean, I think that they try, and they're doing it. Like, I'm not trying to beat up on Google here, but I think spammers are always like 5 steps ahead of wherever Google is.
Yeah, unfortunately, but I think they're aware that it's a really big problem. So keep talking about it. All right, next question is, can we go more in depth on keyword stepping? Not sure.
Yeah, that's a new phrase. I'm not, okay. That may be, Daniel might be referring to long tail keywords. Joy, I'm not sure if you've heard that phrase before.
Well, I think because I mentioned it in the, like, it's hard to come up with a terminology for it, but I call it keyword stuffing, but it's like adding words to your business name inside Google My Business.
Oh, okay.
To get it to rank higher. I don't know what else to call it. We call it keyword stuffing, but it was, so I actually had for time's sake, because I wanted to leave time for Q&A, I did have more of a section on this in my MozCon presentation that dove into exactly how much this impacts ranking. So I'll kind of explain that a bit. It was a number 4 ranking factor, according to the Moz Local Search Ranking Factor study. So like really high on the list. So adding keywords to your business name inside Google My Business has a massive impact on ranking, which is why people do it. I don't suggest you do it if you're wondering if it's a good strategy. Google has been issuing out suspensions for it, so they can actually pull your listing off of Google Maps as a result of you doing this. And currently the wait time to get your listing reinstated is about 3 to 4 weeks, because they have so many listings that have been suspended in the last couple months as a result of doing stuff like this. So don't do it. Report the people that are, is kind of my advice. But as far as how much it impacts ranking, we did a test last year where we took a restaurant listing and we decided to add the word salad bar to their title, and they don't offer a salad bar. So it's not on their menu. There's actually nothing to do with salad bar on their website. So we were just wondering, by adding the word salad bar to the title of the business name, if we could get it to rank. And it went from not ranking anywhere to ranking in the top 5 positions overnight. And then when we removed the word salad bar from the name, it dropped back to not being nowhere. We added it back a week later, same thing happened. Like it has a drastic impact. It shouldn't. I've told Google this many, many times. They need to really adjust their algorithm to not favor it as much. But that is the reason, again, why people do it, because it's effective. So report them.
Yeah. I feel like your proof kind of encourages people to do it. Unfortunately, but that's not our fault.
I know.
That's Google's fault. And we've had plenty that say, hey, our competitor's doing it and they're getting first and we're not. And obviously we have to make the proper recommendations, but it, sometimes, is unfortunate that you see a competitor ranking for that term.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next question, a fun one. How do you determine whether competing GMB listings are fake?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have like 15 pages on this, so it's kind of hard to summarize. But biggest thing I look for is like, does that business exist at that location? So, if there's a business that claims at 15 locations, can you see them on Street View? And if it's a tall building, this can get a little tricky. But I've had cases on the forum that I've helped out with where people go get videos of locations to send in to Google to prove they're fake. If you want to go to that length, that's one option. But usually you can also find through like reliable records. Like I know, for example, for law firms, you could look at like the State Bar to see, where a business is located, or the Better Business Bureau is another source that you can look at to see if a business is located where they say they are. If it's a service area business, like they've got their address hidden, they're only allowed one listing. So if you find 15 listings for like a glass repair company that are all hiding their address, unless it's a franchise that is individually owned, like each location has a different owner, they are not allowed to have multiple listings. So there's a lot of use cases though, so it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah. I would say if you have a specific scenario, reach out on the forum. If you are considering that there's, maybe a competitor or market that's happening to, always reach out. Happy to, someone's going to give you another opinion. Next question. This is a good one. What about lawyers? This person has a lot of lawyer clients, and they typically do their Google listing name as name_personal injury attorney. Is that okay?
No.
Yeah, I'm sure they rank really well for personal injury attorney, but this question actually came up from a client today because they wanted to add something to their name to help describe them. And I know that's probably in your nature. You think that's helpful to put in Google My Business, but it should be however you are publicly represented. What is going to be on all of your marketing material? What is the signage on your building? If everyone comes to you and you answer the phone as, this is Crystal Tang, personal injury attorney, it's printed on your name, it's your legal business name, then that's the only time that you can add it to your listing. And maybe you want to change that to your legal business name.
Some people do.
Yes. All right, question about hyperlocal content. Should it be different on each web page or can it be the same content? What's best practice?
So it's very common that we will have a client that has hundreds, if not thousands, of locations, and they have a template of content that they want to use in these locations, and we hyper-localize this. And I've asked around about this a lot. Will Google ever frown upon that, having the same content repeated over and over again? And Google understands that these are, Fortune 500 companies. These are enterprise clients. Developing custom content for all these pages, that's going to be a tall order. With that said, Google will not penalize you for that, especially if it's localized. But if you want to create custom content, we understand that's some work to do. And where do you start? Well, you always start talking about the actual location itself. You talk about the directions to get there, the neighborhood, any landmarks it's next to. It doesn't have to be that much detail, but not to describe that as well. And one thing we've been pushing lately is to develop content that's in a question and answer format. So you create a question: what time's your store open till? And then you give an answer in the actual hyperlocal custom content. When you do that, you're creating the possibility of maybe getting a Google answer box. That happens sometimes, especially with voice search. Someone will ask, hey, is this store open past midnight, or is this store, what's the holiday hours for the store, or what is this, what is that? That will be able to maybe get you in position 0, which is a very coveted position, because it will be the first result you get for a voice search response. And it will also stand out in the normal Google search, whether you're doing a mobile or a desktop. So for the actual services and products, you have to talk about your services and products uniquely. You're going to talk about the same subject matter, location, but you can reword your content so it's unique, so you're not repeating it over and over again. But I would recommend at least 30% of that long tail content you have is unique, and you can easily accomplish that by talking about the localized information, where to cross streets, directions, etc. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. This next question says, how does Google tackle duplicate content for franchise businesses in close proximity? How do they deal with this? So I imagine, I don't know if it's content or maybe kind of the filtering that Joy mentioned. I think in my experience, when it's not a professional, but it's the same brand, as long as Google thinks it's relevant, the filtering isn't as common as professionals where they think it's, multiple different listings and businesses that they're displaying. But Joy, if you want to add anything to that, if you've seen maybe franchises and how it's filtered out within Google.
Yeah, so actually I did an article, so the article on Moz I linked to addresses this, but I also did one on Search Engine Land as well that was interesting. I can't remember what it was called, but it looked at insurance agents as an example. And so I did a search for like State Farm Chicago and compared it to like Allstate Chicago, for example. And one of the things that Allstate does that's really great, if you look at the organic results for Allstate, you'll find a lot of agents are in the organic results. Like they have, just searching this randomly right now, 29 results that are on allstate.com for their brand name for Allstate Chicago, whereas State Farm, you only get them for 6 before it starts going to like Yelp and then start listing some other sites. So the reason why Allstate does such a good job at this is because they use this company called GatherUp for review monitoring, and it actually puts the reviews on the website. So they have all this unique content on their agent pages that makes each location different, because it's hard to do at scale, right? It's hard to make 17,000 location pages that have different content on them. So that is, I know, one way that they've been successful at kind of avoiding the kind of filtering that we see normally for big brands.
Yeah, and I know, just kind of in referencing that, we've seen that as well in getting reviews and contents for your branded listings, each of the franchisees, outside of adding the marked up reviews on your pages, that incredibly helps for local results. All right, I think we have time for one more question. This question here is, I know you've been talking about this a lot, Joy. Do you find that the Groupon ads in the GMB listing help a client's results?
No. Well, I mean, all it's going to do is take all the people that search for your brand. Now, instead of them calling you, they're going to buy the Groupon and you're going to get them for a fraction of the cost. So I'm personally, this is my opinion, not an advocate of them, but I guess there are some cases where maybe it would be helpful. I just can't think of one.
Yeah, I think there would probably be more use cases for other elements that you can add to your GMB listing to kind of secure that customer. All right, so I am going to pass it back over to Erica. We have a lot more questions that we didn't get to answer today, but we will email you after this with your question and answer. If there's anything else, feel free to email us or tweet at us at Rio SEO, and we will get these out to you. And again, thank you everyone else for joining today. Erica, I'm passing the mouse back to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Crystal. Great questions and discussion. Just wanted to say thank you to Rio for putting together such a great webinar for us, and for, of course, bringing Joy along. We have a few more items from the, from the LSA before we end today's webinar. You'll be able to view today's broadcast along with previous webinars on our website at thelsa.org. Just navigate to Insights Webinars and you will find upcoming webinars and also the link to view past webinars. We have a few events coming up over the next few months and into next year as well. First, we have Place Conference 19 in Austin. Place brings together the best of the best in location intelligence, audience targeting, and offline attribution for a broader look at customer experience challenges, cross-channel opportunities facing today's multi-location brands. As well, registration is now open for our annual conference, LSA 2020, which will take place in San Antonio in March of next year. Our annual conference brings together leaders from across the local spectrum for discussion, education, and networking. During this event, we cover an extensive range of topics related to various local disciplines through multi-stream thought leadership and tactical sessions, making this conference the #1 must-attend event for anyone in the business of local. Early bird pricing is still available for both events, so I encourage you to register as soon as possible if you are interested in attending. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please be sure to visit thelsa.org and subscribe for updates to be the first to know about future webinars. Have a great afternoon, everyone.